Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. And today in Bible study, we finished up the book of Ephesians by looking at Ephesians chapter 6. Now, Ephesians chapter 6 is the end of the so what section, right? And what I mean by that is how understanding who Christ is supposed to affect your life. So we see the end of the household codes, which we started last week, you'll remember, with Paul's commands about husbands and wives. This week he moves on in the beginning to talking about children and masters, or slaves and masters. So kind of how children are supposed to behave, because children, as part of the covenant people, also have duties and responsibilities that falls to them, right? That Jesus has an impact on how children should be acting as well. So, they're supposed to obey their parents in the Lord, which again means that as far as your parents tell you to do something and it doesn't violate God's commands, you should be listening to them and obeying them. That's important to remember because, again, in the system, at the time, you were supposed to do whatever your parents told you, even if it was a bad thing to do. So Paul tells children that, and he also tells parents that they should not, especially fathers, that they should not cause their children to be jaded or to turn against them, right? So you're also supposed to love your kids. And I think what this is really saying is that in Paul's vision of the household, in the biblical vision of the household in the New Testament, the parents exist for the sake of the children, not children for the sake of the parents, which is, again, a very, non-typical way of viewing family relationships at the time, right? It's not the child's duty to do everything the parent wants, but rather the parent is definitely supposed to discipline and teach the child, right? But not see them as a means to an end type of thing. So that's important. Second thing that's important is the slaves and masters, because you have to remember at the time that Paul was writing this, the Roman Empire and really every place was a slave society, which means that there were people that were held in bondage. Now, it looked a lot different in some respects to what we experienced in the United States and kind of our most recent memory of slavery, right, that many of us have, the one we were taught in school and the one that we kind of are very aware of in the American context. It wasn't race-based chattel slavery, right? There were lots of negative aspects, lots in the Roman system, but it wasn't. The thing that makes it most different from ours is really that it wasn't based on ethnicity. Regardless, though, these sections can still be kind of hard for us because I think as many modern people, we desire to see Paul just say you shouldn't have slaves, right? That's what we would like to see. And actually, I would argue in certain places he does kind of say that. But in this one, right, what he's doing is he's showing how what Jesus has done for you is supposed to have an impact on your life and the way you carry yourself. So if you're a slave, you should really, try to win the heart of your master for Christ by serving well. And the same goes for masters, right? If you're a master, you should not be mistreating your slaves at all, because you also have a master. So again, very bold for the time that it was being written in. And I think, challenging to us because I think we can easily take those principles and apply them in our own context with business relationships and how we work and things like that. So important to have that as well. And then Paul moves on from the household codes, because slaves would have been considered part of the household at the time, and he moves on to the armor of God, which is probably the most famous passage from Ephesians, right? I've heard people do sermon series on this. I've seen it done at conferences when I was in youth group or whatever. I think it's because people I've seen it done at men conferences, right? Because it's war or whatever. And it's good stuff. And basically, I think the only thing I can add here, because you probably know a lot about it already, is what Paul is doing here is he's taking the imagery of the Roman soldier and he's mixing it with the imagery of God that we get in the New Testament as a warrior. And most of this is taken from Isaiah. And if you have a study Bible, it might actually put you to where those places are. Um, but one of the things that's important, right, is that uh, nearly all of the things are defensive. So it's all armor and shield and belt and sandals and like all of these things that are meant to be defensive, which is how God protects us. That's kind of what Paul is saying here, right? He protects our minds, protects our hearts, right? We're able to go and evangelize through what he's been able to do. And we are given one offensive weapon, which is the sword of the Spirit, but it's God's word, right? And we're able to do that through what God, like we're able to combat things through remembering what God has told us, right? What His commandments are. So, it's all of this just to say, like, your life should be reflecting God, literally, because these are attributes that God has in the Old Testament. And of course, these things are also ascribed to Christ in stuff like Revelation and things like that. But he ends with this really interesting thing where he refers to himself as an ambassador in chains type of thing. And what that I think is supposed to get us to understand is that Paul, right, he has all this armor, right? He has the sandals, especially, right? He's going out, he's sharing the gospel with people, and that he's been assigned to do this by God. But in the weird, messed up way our world works, that that is ruled over by these powers and principalities, as he mentions in this passage, that even he, right, should have this diplomatic immunity, right? This idea that ambassadors aren't attacked or killed for whatever their country does, right? Because that's just not good for them. But Paul says that even though he's an ambassador, he is in chains. And that really is like the Christian life, right? That we are all supposed to be ambassadors of God to people, and that the world might not respond the best way. But we rely on God in order to get through that. So that's what we talked about today. We're going to start something new for Advent next week. Still trying to decide what that is. But I will see all of you tomorrow for a new thing with some movie reviews. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.